That you were thinking.
If you're interested in seeing the interview, check it out later on today on Facebook. If you guys want to keep up to date news on the border never leaves. So that's a good one. Thank you for what you guys are doing.
No, it didn't come out at all. My mom
You will see that how you
really.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming out to our general town hall meeting. Today, the call is being presented by Riverside High School JRTC. Will you be kind enough to stand, please?
Hey, on. Right, hey, over, arm.
Today, singing the national anthem is Ms. Vianney Molina.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
If you could please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, let's give Riverside a round of applause, please. Please take a seat. Please take a seat. Okay, before we start this general town hall, I need to read a disclaimer to you. Today our town hall will start with a presentation from the Congresswoman. After her presentation, she will hear from people who signed up and ask questions at the sign-in table at the entrance. You will be called up in the order you signed up. We will call 3 speakers at a time. When your name is read, please walk over to this podium and line up in the order you was called. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes. to ask questions. We want to hear from as many speakers as possible, so please be mindful of your time limit. You will hear a beep when your time is up. If we run out of time and we are not able to get to your question today, Congressman Escobar's team will call you Monday to hear your comments or any concerns you may have. We know that public forums like these are important in keeping you informed and giving you opportunity to ask the Congresswoman questions and to share your ideas. We might not all agree with each other, but it's important that we are respectful of one another and of this forum. We encourage a positive environment of dialogue that will allow everybody the ability to hear and learn from each other. Anyone behaving in a distracted manner will be asked to leave the event. Once again, anyone behaving in a distracted manner will be asked to leave the event. Members of the public are encouraged to take pictures and videotape the presentation at the rear where the media is at. If you're going to do this, please join the media in the designated area. Please leave signs and banners in your car so they do not distract from the conversation. In saying that, with no further ado, I present to you Congresswoman Veronica Escobar.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful to all of you who have taken time out from your Saturday afternoon to come join us for what is our 8th town hall meeting. We are back in a neighborhood very close to where I grew up, and so I'm so glad to be in the Riverside area. I grew up not too far from here on North Loop near my family's dairy, Escobar Dairy. So for those of you who remember Escobar Dairy, that was my family's dairy, and so this whole area is home for me, my neighborhood where I grew up. So we're gonna, as Benito mentioned, I'm gonna go through a quick PowerPoint. I want to give you an update on everything that's happening in Washington. There's a lot that's been going on, and then I want to quickly move to Q&A. All right. So, wanted to share with you, we mentioned this at the beginning and at the end of every one of our town hall meetings and at all our constituent meetings and group meetings. Please sign up for our newsletter if you don't already subscribe. We asked and received about 1,200 responses to a question from our constituents who subscribe to the newsletter about what their priorities are. And you can see that this actually is very interesting. It's definitely changed over the course of the last year, and immigration is now the #1 priority. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that near the end. And obviously, because we are on the front lines of much of what is happening, there's no question that's why that's risen to the top. Healthcare is at 20%. At 13% each is Veterans Affairs, Jobs and the Economy, and Education, and then finally the environment. So what did we do this month since we last met at our last town hall? We passed H.R. 5, the Equality Act. I'm very proud of having passed that. It essentially prohibits discrimination in the workplace and any participation in any public spaces based on sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity. We also passed H.R. 987, the Strengthening Healthcare and Lowering Prescription Drug Cost Acts, which includes one of my amendments. But one of the things that I consistently hear back from folks about is the high cost of prescription drugs, so we wanted to get to that very quickly. We also passed the Consumers First Act to be sure to protect American consumers, and it included my amendment that protected veterans who used specific credit unions and banks. Okay, next slide. We also, last week, passed H.R. 6, Protections for Dreamers. Thank you. It was a really wonderful, exciting day. This, as you know, has been languishing for a long time. And the Dreamer protection was signed by executive order by President Obama. When candidate Trump was the candidate, he mentioned that he too wanted to protect dreamers. We heard from our friends on the other side of the aisle that they also wanted to protect dreamers. But unfortunately, we did not get a whole lot of bipartisan support. We got some, but not a whole lot of bipartisan support. We put into place into that law criminal bars that bar certain crimes committed by those applying for the DREAM Act from getting into the process. And we did that specifically because we wanted to allay fears by our friends on the other side of the aisle about not having criminal bars. But despite our work and how specific we were to address their concerns about people who committed DWI or felonies and putting in place all sorts of other restrictions, we still did not get as much support as we had hoped, but it passed the House, and I'm very proud of it. What's ahead? This upcoming week is going to be one of the most significant weeks for us in Congress. There's two things happening this week. The first, and this starts on Wednesday, is the NDAA passage, we hope. The NDAA is the National Defense Authorization Act. It is the big bill of the year. It is the defense bill. And we have worked very hard in our House Armed Services Committee, which I am so privileged to be a part of. We've worked through the two subcommittees that I'm a part of, the Military Personnel Subcommittee and the Readiness Subcommittee. We've worked in a bipartisan manner through those committees to make sure that we have an NDAA that gets to our full committee on Wednesday morning with as much support. Having said that, we've been warned by our committee chair that these markups go very, very late, so we've been told we probably won't be done until about 2 or 3 the next morning. And we have to be there through that whole time, so I have to be sure to take my readings that morning on Wednesday morning. Also that day, beginning Tuesday and into Wednesday, we will begin hearing amendments on the House floor for certain appropriations bills. Not all of them, but most of them, about 5 of them, 5 out of 8. These are very important. These are the bills that operate the government going forward. We, on the House side, we started very, very early. We're trying to get this done in June to avoid a potential government shutdown at the end of this fiscal year in September. And so fingers crossed that we will get much of this done this week. We still have 3 other appropriations bills that we will have to tackle. And the one that will probably be the most contentious is the Department of Homeland Security because of the different values and perspectives from folks on that one. But hopefully by tackling this early, we can avoid the awfulness that is a government shutdown, which, as you all know, when I was sworn in January, I was sworn into a shutdown government. So hopefully we don't do that. In the NDAA, we worked really, really hard to get some wins for El Paso, and we've gotten some really good ones. Again, you all know I was sworn in January, and so the work that we've done has been over the course of 5 months. We know that we can advance this even further next year, a year from now. So first and foremost, the first bullet is about the VA and William Beaumont Hospital. Those of you who have seen the new William Beaumont Hospital and where it's going know that it's very, very far on a military installation from the existing VA, which is in central El Paso. We have heard from countless veterans that this is terrible, and their disappointment expressed to us that they don't understand why, when the new hospital was being built, the VA wasn't built right next to it in order to access the full cadre of Veterans Healthcare Services. So what we did was we worked with Armed Services, and what bullet point number 1 essentially does is it preserves the land right next to the new William Beaumont, and it lays the groundwork for a report that will prove that having those 2 facilities co-located will improve military readiness. And William Beaumont is specifically listed in that, and it's in the base bill, which is a huge win. It's not an amendment. It's going to be, you have to specifically go in and try to strike it out of the base bill. But like I said, we've done a lot of bipartisan work to try to preserve everything that's in the base bill. Advanced manufacturing. UTEP is leading the country in this area, and they are partnering with DoD contractors. And what advanced manufacturing is essentially 3D printing. UTEP, our incredible UTEP students, our engineering students, are teaching soldiers how to 3D print parts. If you've ever seen 3D printing, it's wild. It's a box and you program in data and you'll see the actual, it's like a printer, and out comes a product. There are healthcare products that UTEP is leading the way on 3D printing, but where I am very interested is in what they're doing with the Department of Defense. Because I believe that not only helps UTEP, it not only helps the military, it helps our local economy by growing jobs in that area. We've already worked closely with Lockheed Martin. We're hoping that they will open up a satellite office here so that they're close to our UTEP kids. That will open up the door for a number of high-paying jobs, and I'm hoping we can grow that industry. So we got in the NDAA work, the area out of UTEP that the 3D printing happens is called the William Keck Center, and the program they work with is called America Works, and we got an appropriation of $10 million for that. So we are very, very excited about what's going to happen next. Diversity. What we learned through our hearings is at the lower end of recruitment and the personnel, the soldiers, the sailors, etc., on a certain end, the lower end of the scale, very diverse. Looks like America in terms of the number of women and the number of minorities. All of that changes as you go up the ranks, and it becomes far less diverse. One of the questions that I asked during our hearings was, what are you doing to promote diversity among your higher ranks so that we're able to move great soldiers, women and men, who are minorities up the chain? We had a great dialogue, but this essentially gets into the bill that we have actual strategies in place to get that done and reports back to Congress about whether that has happened or not. Resiliency. Fort Bliss has led the way on resiliency through their solar projects as well as the desalinization plant that they helped create with the city of El Paso about 20 years ago. We have seen a number of military installations that have, for example, Camp Lejeune and other military installations that have really suffered because of flooding and that are not resilient enough to withstand the changes in climate that we're seeing. We heard that directly from our military leaders, that the military, that the DOD, that Congress has not done enough to prepare those military installations. And so then they're offline for months and months and months, making us less ready. So many of us see resiliency and preparing for climate change as part of our job for readiness. And we got some great wins in the NDAA for that. Defense Community Infrastructure Program, that's actual funding that goes to communities like El Paso to support our roads and highways and other infrastructure as we support our military installations. The challenge was there was not one agency that was in charge of distributing the money, so the money sat there all of last year. When we went in to try to find an avenue for El Paso to apply for the money, and we were told, well, there's no agency that's in charge of it, so the money's just sitting there, we worked with leadership to assign it to the DOD and to make sure that they have a process in place so that our community can apply for those funds. So that was a big win, and it helps communities all over the country who support military installations. The last one, small business. We heard from the SBA, the Small Business Association, and the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce that their small business advocate was going to be moving to Fort Hood from Fort Bliss. And they were very alarmed because that advocate helps sign up small businesses to get government contracts. They are afraid that move will cause real harm to our local economy. And so we worked with leadership and with other communities to say, okay, military, before you do that, put the brakes. Before you do that, you have to report to Congress with an explanation of what it will do to a community, what it will do to minority-owned and women-owned businesses, because the DOD wants to have more minority-owned and women-owned businesses apply for their contracts. And so we believe that this will be a big win ultimately in keeping that small business advocate. Okay, let's talk about immigration, because that was the #1 issue in the responses that we got from our newsletter. And I'm going to repeat what I have said actually in many of our meetings, our cafecito, our town hall meetings. And I'm going to start with this. I believe that all of us probably have the same goal, and I believe that none of us like the current situation. And by all of us having the same goal, my assumption is that all of us agree that the exodus from Central America, and actually from other countries as well, that it is overwhelming and that it is unsustainable. For those of you here in this room who have been so generous and have exhibited so much goodwill in your volunteerism to Annunciation House and with the refugees, I have heard directly from you how overwhelming it is. I know it is. And so if we can agree that we all want to try to address the exodus. And so I've been working with 3 avenues. Number 1 is legislation. So we've been working actually on a new bill, and we have other smaller pieces of legislation, but an actual bill that we hope will stem the exodus and help us have a more strategic approach. And I'll tell you about that in just a second. But we know that even if we pass legislation in the House, there is very little legislation that is being taken up and heard in the Senate. In fact, only a few bills have been taken up by the Senate, while we have passed at least 2 dozen, if not far more. And so the reality of legislation getting heard on the Senate floor is very slim. That's the reality. And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has actually taken great pride in that. He has said publicly, call me the Grim Reaper of legislation. So he has sent us a signal very loudly, publicly, and clearly that he's not going to take up legislation while the House is under control by a different party. So legislation, I don't have high hopes for in the Senate. The other 2 avenues that we've been working that I've specifically been working, is through the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, who I have a very good relationship with and who is very open to our discussions and conversations, as well as the CBP, the Customs Border Protection Acting Commissioner. Both of them are very receptive to phone calls and to concerns and to ideas. So that's the second avenue, is direct contact with the administration. The third avenue we're working is through the appropriations process. Appropriations bills have to pass. They have to pass in order to fund the government. So we're looking at avenues to create change and to create reform through those appropriations bills. So let me tell you what we've been suggesting and working on. We think that I think there needs to be a 3-pronged approach. We've got to deal with the immediate challenge, we've got to deal with the midterm challenge, and then we've got to address the long-term challenge. If we don't deal with the long-term, we're never gonna slow down. If we don't create stability in Central America, we're gonna keep seeing the numbers that we're seeing. So in the short term, one of the things that I recommended, and it actually now is being adopted by CBP, there are a number of positions that should be civilianized, what's called civilianized. Data entry positions, other positions where you don't necessarily need law enforcement to conduct them. You don't need law enforcement to do some processing aspects. You can use civilians for those functions. Professionals, folks that are hired, trained to do that. That has now been taken up by the acting commissioner, and they've advertised for those jobs. What that does is it gets our agents and officers back to the jobs that they were trained to do and that they want to do at our ports of entry and along the border. So that is already something we put a check mark on, and we've worked for months to show examples during tours of where this could happen and be successful. And I'm very grateful to the acting commissioner for his open mind on this. Number 2, we said local governments need to be reimbursed. We have local taxpayers and nonprofits that have been shouldering the burden for the federal government's inaction on so much of this. I am hopeful that that will happen. I'm hopeful that it will be retroactive. I've already spoken with our local governments to tell them to make sure to keep track of expenditures so that the federal government, if this passes in an appropriations bill, so that they can be ready to seek that reimbursement. The NGO side is harder, but we are looking at creating grants to help the non-government organizations and nonprofits like Annunciation House so that they can address their the amount of money that they've poured into helping the federal government. Then we also believe, I believe, that two last things for the short term. We need to incorporate nonprofits into migrant processing. So as the federal government is processing folks, what happens is once they're released, they stay for about 24 to 48 hours in a hospitality center while volunteers help connect them to their sponsor and arrange travel arrangements. We believe the more efficient way to do it is by having those two processes happen at the same time so that the community, nonprofits and volunteers aren't shouldering as much of the burden. So while the federal government is processing migrants and checking for criminal records and fingerprints, etc., that we have volunteers working to connect these migrants to their sponsors so that as they walk out of ICE processing, they already have their Greyhound bus ticket or their airline ticket in hand. We believe that that will help. Sir, yeah, if we could, yeah. If you'll just let me in, and you guys can ask questions, okay? And then lastly, we need to fund humanitarian approaches in the immediate. Yesterday, I toured the port of entry downtown, where there are probably at least 200, if not more, migrants who are under shade structures under the bridge behind that processing center. Almost to a person, personnel there told me we need more funding for, and this is our law enforcement said, we need more funding for more humanitarian approaches. So I agree. In the midterm, one of the things in a bill that I'm working on is we have to be better as a federal government of understanding what's happening in our hemisphere and what is driving people to our borders. The more we can understand that, the better equipped we are to stabilize countries, to work with partners, to make sure that we create real, true solutions. So we're working on that. We also, I believe, we've got to reinstate programs that we knew were working. We had in-country processing, where folks in the Northern Triangle would be able to access asylum requests in their own country before making the trek to America. That was eliminated by the Trump administration. We need to reinstate that. If we want them to apply in their home country, which is what we used to do, we need to reinstate that program. We also need to reinstate the humanitarian aid that went to the Northern Triangle to begin to stabilize things there. We don't have to do that, but then we can expect that nothing will change. And I would like to see some change. We also, the backlog now in immigration courts is growing because the Trump administration eliminated the funding for new judges that was approved by the prior Congress. We can't complain about a backlog if the administration is essentially sitting on money appropriated by Congress meant to deal with that, adjudicate those cases. In the long term, we have to work with leaders in our hemisphere. We have to. This is a shared, collaborative challenge that we should all be dealing with together. We should have every leader around the table. We've been talking with the State Department because in the absence of this happening from the White House, it's going to have to be Congress that figures out a way to do this. And then finally, I believe we have to audit and reform the Department of Homeland Security. What we have seen over the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, is an inability to quickly shift to address immediate changing challenges. We need to know why. They receive a significant amount of taxpayer money. They are far less nimble than other agencies, so we've got to figure out why that is and make sure that we equip and train and prepare people for the jobs that they are going to be confronting. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is a copy of the immigration legislation that I've passed so far. Next slide. Going back to the readiness question, for armed services, I was so proud to co-sponsor a bicameral piece of legislation with Senator Elizabeth Warren that essentially mandates that our military installations enact the same kind of resiliency programs that I just talked about earlier that Fort Bliss has enacted. And so we heard, again, directly from our military leaders. I'm very proud of that piece of legislation. Let's be signing it. Okay, armed services. We had a number of oversight hearings. All of the information we gained in those oversight hearings, we tried to incorporate in to the NDAA. We had hearings on medical malpractice issues and how servicemen and women and their families are unable to sue in the case of medical malpractice. We want to change that. Army modernization, resiliency, nuclear priorities. We also want to lower veteran suicides. Fort Bliss is, last year's data showed us that Fort Bliss is among the highest in the nation for veteran suicide. So we want to know why, and we're asking that resources be redirected to the top 10 military installations that have the highest rates to try to tackle that problem. Also worked on proposed reforms to the military personnel system and the military sexual assault review process. Judiciary, we have had hearings. I'm going to take a quick minute here to talk about the latest that's happening with judiciary. So I also serve on the Judiciary Committee, and we, as you may know, are sort of the tip of the spear on accountability about the Mueller report. And so we have called witnesses like Attorney General William Barr, like Don McGahn, like Hope Hicks, and others who we learned from the Mueller report had a front row seat or had firsthand information on what happened during both the presidential campaign and shortly after that. And we're doing that because, for context, here's what happened. We were attacked by a foreign adversary. We were attacked. That attack was on our elections. Russia was wildly successful, and Russia is still at it today. Last month, we got a classified hearing, Republicans and Democrats alike. I obviously can't divulge what we received in that classified hearing, but Russia is still at work today. It is very, very scary to know that the integrity of our elections is at risk. It also frightened me to know that as I read through the report, that the president, his family, and his campaign team knew about Russia's efforts. They welcomed it. They never reported it. Never reported it to federal law enforcement, not once. When they were confronted about it, they lied about it. They destroyed evidence about it. And as the investigation began, they made attempts to obstruct the investigation. Congress is now fulfilling our responsibility on oversight, and our efforts to investigate are being obstructed. We just got a letter yesterday. We have a hearing on Monday. We got a letter yesterday from the ranking member wanting to limit our hearings and what we say, wanting to even limit our ability to talk about overt criminal acts. This is a level of obstruction that should be unacceptable to everyone. And I said this to my Republican colleagues during our hearing. This should be an issue that unites all of us as Americans. We should all be standing up for our country, to protect and defend our country. I took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution and this country from enemies, foreign and domestic, and my role in oversight is part of that. So I am one of probably about 4 dozen members of Congress, including one Republican, who is calling on the beginning of impeachment inquiries. We are not going to be able to advance our oversight without that. We're just not. We keep getting obstacle after obstacle after obstacle to you all getting the truth about the attack. When we can't get that truth, we can't protect our next election. So that's why I say we all should be unified in that. Okay, next slide. Okay, in El Paso, as I mentioned, we've had the 8 town hall meetings. We had our first cafecito where we notified a neighborhood, and we're going to be doing this in every single neighborhood. We notified neighborhood residents, asked them to join and have a cup of coffee. The first one was really wonderful. We had about 40 people. We had a great dialogue. The beautiful thing in that meeting was we had a very diverse group of people with very divergent views, and we all were so respectful to one another. At the end of the meeting, people shook hands and exchanged names, and that's what we believe civil discourse should be. And so I'll be having more, and we'll let folks know. Also met with the LGBTQ Advisory Committee in light of the Equality Act. We held our second quarterly Veterans Roundtable. We meet with VSOs, Veteran Service Organizations, so that we are on top of what the issues are that they're hearing from their veterans. We just had our Veterans Town Hall this morning. And then also met with folks working to battle the high price of insulin for El Pasoans, and we're looking at ways to bring those prices down. We are also, for those of you who are veterans, we announced this morning, we are wanting to take your stories, preserve them, send them to the Library of Congress so that they are preserved forever, and so that Americans can hear the stories of El Paso veterans. We're going to be having a training in August. If you are a veteran or if you know of a veteran, we want to hear your story in order to preserve it. This is our district office constituent services team. We work very hard here every day to take in the concerns by our constituents and resolve them, whether it be a Social Security issue or a VA issue or any other issue related to the federal government. And I'm very proud that our satisfaction surveys at the end of the closed cases, we take down satisfaction that's very, very high. And that's because we have a team here at home that works very, very hard for you all. I'm very proud of the work that they do. They love this community, they love our citizens as much as I do, and they are committed to helping you every day. These are our 2 offices. Please, again, a reminder to sign up for our newsletter if you don't have it. And at this point, I'd like to get to the questions. So MJ will announce the first 3 folks. So as she announces your name, if you could come on over and wait in the order in which your name was called, and I'll answer your question.
Art Slayo, Ron Bryant, Anthony Aguero.
Just hold it. Oh. Just hold it.
Good afternoon, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thank you. You know, I wish the Democrats would have tried from the West and tried to make it whatever it was. That way, you guys would have taken care of that and fixed it right off the ground. The next thing is, I'm talking about illegal aliens, Mexican illegal aliens. We have built this country. We raised your kids. We cut your grass. We see your houses. We do everything you guys don't want to do. We're eliminated. We Minnesota and cousins. We're taking over that. We do everything. We build America. We do everything that you guys don't want to do. And we're doing it. Now all of a sudden we got all these people. Who would they shoot at us? They bring a baby in Juarez and they can cross the borders. What about us that don't make the United States? We get deported. If you're an illegal alien criminal, get your ass out. If you but if you get caught, you get caught. But what about it hurts when you see all these people coming in and taking things that we built. Are you guys going to treat us the same way as you do those kids? Do we have go to Juarez, he's there, and shoot at you. What? And then we can't get fired. Why can't the Mexican get fired? Why do you guys treat the Mexican illegal aliens different than you do others? It's wrong. We, your people, you're Mexican. How the hell do you let all these people in here and and they're going to take over everything. We built. What is the reason? What is the reason? You know, we built America, and you're kicking us out, and other people are reaping what we sow. It's wrong. It's totally morally wrong. You're treating those people better than military. You're treating those people better than people here can't go to the hospital, can't go to the doctor, can't go. And those guys, they did everything. You sneezed, you got to go to the doctor. You didn't like we spend money. Money. Give them a fine job. Give them a job. We, the Mexican illegal aliens, don't just treat us like that. You know, give us a little, you guys turn your back on.
Thank you, sir. And I appreciate you being here at the town hall meeting and sharing your thoughts with us. This country was built on immigrants. That is our history. That's who we are. That's who we will continue to be. The way that we will be viewed by each other and by history will be about the way we act in this moment. In this moment of tremendous stress and strife and difficulty. I absolutely believe that Mexicanos were treated differently. And I never advocated that any one group be treated differently than any other. In fact, many folks will say, you know, let them get in line. For many people, there is no line. That's the truth. What we have to do in order to deal with the tremendous challenge that we face today is what I described to you in that slide. We've got to have a long-term plan. We've got to have a midterm plan. We've got to have an immediate plan. But to deny people access to legal asylum or to treat people with cruelty does one thing. It erodes our own humanity. And each one of us should resist that as much as we can. Because in the end, we all have to look at ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves how we treated fellow human beings. Next question. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. Veronica, I have an NPO that's in Mexico for 20 years. Within that time, I applied for over 40 grants. 40 grants. And a lot of times we got no consideration, and maybe it's just that we didn't know what to do or whatever. Within that 20 years, I got $120 from the Mexican government. From the United States government, I got $0. And I hold the program together just for my SSI. We have so many problems with an NPO that we just don't know where to turn, because now the basic things that we try to do in Mexico as far as the youth are concerned is being put on the back burner because of all the people seeking asylum. And if you think it's bad over here, it's even worse in Mexico, and it's going to be a boiling point. A lot of Mexicans, youth and adults, at that point where they can't understand, as the gentleman had spoken earlier, what about us? And, you know, I just want to point this out because, you know, being an NPO, nonprofit organization, we don't have 501c because we can't even afford the $500 to get our full 501c situation, you know? And so I just want to let you know that people in Mexico are also at a boiling point. And so, you know, the thing is that the grants, we need to do something. There is a special category that says 501c that do not have, you know, nonprofits that do not have 501c. This should be a special category. But even those, we don't even get looked at.
First of all, thank you for the work you do in the nonprofit realm and the devotion that you give to the youth. I really appreciate that. And you're right, things even in Ciudad Juarez are at a boiling point and throughout Mexico. I had visited Casa Migrante in Juarez to get a sense for what's happening there as people wait in the queue under what's called metering. And things are very desperate over there as well. And I have heard from Mexicanos who feel exactly as you described. Like, we have needs and we need to address these needs. This is why we have to work collaboratively with all of the leaders of this hemisphere. This is not one country's problem to solve. This is not two countries' problem to solve. We have to have people at the table. That's what presidential leadership is about, bringing countries together to find collaborative ways to address problems. And we've got to get to the root cause of the instability, or all we're doing is pushing off a problem to a boiling point next door. If we want to solve it, let's solve it. And that's why we hope to further engage the State Department. I hope that some of the work that we're doing to create more stabilization in the Northern Triangle will help. But you do have to get your 501c3, unfortunately, in order to qualify for charitable donations. That's federal law. I don't know about grants from the U.S. to Mexico or how they even exist, but we will look into it. Want to get your number so that we can circle back with you to see what we have discovered. Thank you, sir.
Ben Canevale, Laura Escobedo, Edmundo Muñoz.
Good afternoon, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Ms. Escobar. I'm just going to lay it out exactly how I feel. Unfortunately, instead of representing the people of this country, you have continued to represent those that continue to flood into our country illegally. Instead of representing American children, you have chosen to represent those children who have been brought here illegally, sometimes even recycled. Instead of meeting with the people who are concerned about porous borders, instead of meeting with migration advocates, instead of representing the poor and the homeless of America, you continue to represent those who have not paid a dime into federal taxes. Instead of listening to those of us who have, and who will soon have some cases and already taken from the pot of revenue of our elderly that have paid into it, that fully deserve it. You continue to say that we are a country of compassion, yet the homeless crisis in our nation continues to grow day by day. If you were truly compassionate as you came to be, you would be working overtime to help the homeless here in El Paso. And you say you want to get to the root of all of this instability. The fact of the matter is that you not hear not one politician speaking about the open migration pact that was signed onto by Mexico and 190 other something countries. At that time, Mexico becomes a complete open borders, and people are trying to come over here into Mexico to exploit our weak immigration laws. These people are not fleeing climate change or global warming. These people are being incentivized, and I have documentation and videos of American journalists and some activists and leftist liberal groups down there incentivizing the movement of these individuals to come over here to reap the benefits of America. We need you to start standing up for your constituents, and we want to be able to have a secure border, and we want to do things right. And we seem to be advocating for individuals to continue to come into our country illegally and continue to reward them. Why is it that you continue to stand up for these individuals when we have so many other issues that we need to deal with here locally?
Thank you so much for your question. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us. So a couple things. I have long been committed to local issues. I think many of you know that I have served for almost a dozen years on El Paso Commissioner's Court, working on issues related to health care for El Pasoans, criminal justice reform, quality of life, increasing transportation access, and the list goes on and on. My love of this community, my commitment to this community cannot be challenged, and I have a record to show it. My job as a federal representative is to work with the federal government and to deal with the issues and the challenges that we are facing. Now, I could give you, and maybe next time we do this, an entire list that we have rolling the entire meeting of all the legislation I've co-sponsored, sponsored, passed, voted for to help Americans with the rising cost of prescription drugs, to help veterans, for example, with challenges that they have with getting due process in civil courts when they've been the victim of a medical malpractice action. I can give you example after example after example of work that I do every single day in the House of Representatives that I am so proud to do. But because I say that we should be a compassionate nation and that we should treat all people with dignity and respect, doesn't mean I am un-American or pro-open borders. It means that I was raised with values that reflect this community in our lives. Now, I'm not sitting on my hands and saying, let's welcome everybody. I acknowledged during my presentation, this is unsustainable, this is very difficult. My motivation for wanting to stem the flow may be different than what other people's motivation is. I think people have a right to a secure, safe life in their homeland. And if we can help them achieve that, it is in our best interest to do so. And so I would like to do that. I believe that we should respect our asylum laws, and people have a right to legally requesting asylum. And I don't believe that we should, as a government, be breaking our own laws that have been on the books to allow for due process. Now, I know we have a very different view of this. Your view is important, and I'm so glad that you came and that you signed up and that you shared this with me. I need to hear from you, and I want to hear from you, and I appreciate hearing from you. I think, again, as I mentioned, I think ultimately we want the same thing. I do think we want to make sure that we are not a community that is so overburdened that, believe me, yesterday when I was at the port, it kills me to see what our agents are going through. This is not a good situation for anyone. I don't think any of us here see this as a good situation. I think the only difference that we have is in the approach that we have and the way that we want to solve the problem. But do I want to solve it? I do. But thank you for being here. Next question. Mr. Ben Canada. Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for what you're doing for the VA. I'm a vet, disabled, and what you're doing is good. I appreciate that. Now, what I'm concerned about is you said there's 40-something of you who are looking for a future. There's 500 plus homeless people, so I feel you're wasting your time. I think it's a disrespect for the people who voted for Trump. I'm an independent, by the way, so Democrats don't hate me. I look at both things. And it's just like you said, because you feel that we're a compassionate country and that you're doing what you do, that doesn't make you American. At the same time, because the Trump supporters, they want security on the borders, they want things done orderly. It doesn't make them Nazis. So I think it's important that if we're going to look at this from an American standpoint, we got to see the sides of both of us, of both parties. That needs to happen because we're falling apart, we're killing each other for the sake of an issue that I think Congress is trying to fix. But it's not getting done, at least in our eyes, because all we're doing is bickering and screaming at each other and talking over each other instead of listening. I met a gentleman this afternoon, this morning, that we almost killed each other for the first 3 minutes, but after we got to know each other, he's a Democrat, he's a Canadian Democrat, so I like that. But when we started talking about issues, we started realizing there's more in common than we don't have in common. I'm a compassionate guy. I think we should help people who come over here, but I think we should help people who come over here that want to do things because they're in desperate need of help because where they're at, they're going to be killed or whatever. Now, I've spoken to a lot of immigrants that are coming over here. A lot of them are not desperate. They just know there's a gate open right now. We got to admit that. We can say, yeah, there's a percentage that are needing help, but not all of them. And I think the Border Patrol is trying to do what they can. And I also feel that calling what the Border Patrol is doing as cruel or whatever is unfair. They were not prepared for this. They got 1,000 people sitting where there's supposed to be 200 people. What are they supposed to do? Just let them all in? We can't do that. We've got to do this orderly. We've got to make sure we filter out the gangs, the drugs, the trafficking. Thank you. Thank you.
Ben, thank you so much. And let me tell you, I want you to know that I have never called Border Patrol agents cruel. It's this administration. So and that has come out through government documents and through reports on plans for child-family separation and other policies that many of us believe are incredibly cruel. But Ben, I so appreciate your call to all of us to be, to listen to one another, to hear each other, not to demonize one another. I think we all should aim for that. And I agree 100%. Now, and I will tell you, I have met innumerable Border Patrol agents who have brought, with their own money, brought diapers, brought food, brought supplies, and you're right, Ben, this is not fair to them, which is why, you know, I've tried to offer suggestions that are now being incorporated. Let's get civilians to do this kind of work. I want our Border Patrol chasing down the folks who are coming over to do us harm. Let's process asylum seekers in a different way. I don't want a highly trained agent or officer from the port that's keeping us safe by scanning for drugs and other things to be doing data entry. And so I want to make sure that we treat our agents with the respect and dignity that they deserve as well. And then finally on the impeachment, you're right, a lot of folks have said, isn't this a waste of time? And actually at our prior meeting, someone made the suggestion, why not wait until more Republicans are on board? Then it truly looks like a community issue. I mean, a country bipartisan issue, a national issue. I can only speak for myself, not for the strategy of the caucus or the party. After reading the report, and again, I encourage you all to read it. It's a long report, it's 450 pages. It is hard to put down. I will tell you, it is riveting and gripping and heartbreaking, but you should read it. I felt compelled after that. And after a series of what I felt were efforts to obstruct our ability to investigate and question witnesses, that this is the only avenue left. But thank you for being here, Ben. I appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Escobar, thank you for my question or remarks here. I was fortunate enough to retire about 4 years ago. Come back now to my legislature with Pasco. I was raised in the Juarez. We still always love the country in 1960. Grandfather has exploded. So we really value our rights here. We've done things right. I was fortunate. All right. Sorry. I really value living in America. All our family moved up here from Juarez. We did things right. I was fortunate enough to retire 4 years ago, moved back down here. I realized the taxes have gone up significantly. But also, right by Roger Bay, I'm disabled. I took care of my mother. I'm a single father of 3 children. It's very tough for me. And I also work as a recovery coach. And it is devastating to me that these 10 of the individuals, people about 20, at least half of them are gone. Because it is now easier to score a fentanyl-laced speedball on our streets than it is marijuana. And I'm concerned for my 14-year-old, and I'm really scared. And I apologize for my outburst. I mentioned airplanes. It's just, my wife is working right now. It's a 9/11, really, it was devastating to us all. But TSA is violating their own policies. I couldn't even get on the plane when my wife died because I didn't have an ID. These individuals, and this confirmed reports now that ISIS was attempting something. That's my biggest fear, that we're, like you say, end up in that lines. And again, I wasn't the biggest Trump supporter, but I mean, he's done a few good things. I feel it's very unfair. I feel like this deal he reached yesterday, extending immigration to Mexico. How much did you guys really help him with that? Start working with that.
First of all, I'm so sorry about your loss. And thank you for being here. I really appreciate you. We have a difference of opinion on the administration's approach to this. I don't think that they have helped. I think, for example, with family separation as a deterrent, by doing that without a plan for reunifying families, what they've done is not only do something that many of us think is abhorrent, but the administration, DHS, the agency in charge of reunifying, because there was no plan, then had to scramble and figure it out, diverting resources away from what they should be working on and what should be the focus to fix a problem caused by the administration. I gave you all an example of 3, and there are more things that the administration has done to eliminate programs that were working. I think that has exacerbated, I think if people were able to apply for asylum in country, that gives them an incentive to stay in applying country. And I'll tell you that it's treacherous. It is treacherous It is, no one should have to do that. But he eliminated in-country processing. That doesn't make sense to me. So we have a difference of opinion on whether the administration has actually done things to fix it. But nevertheless, I have an obligation to fix it. And that's why I detailed for you the work that we're doing. And I want to mention the opioid, you mentioned the opioid crisis. That's another priority for Congress. I joined a mental health caucus. I feel that many of the root causes of addiction stem from some mental health issues. Not all the time, but I think that that is a significant factor. And as a country, we've not done enough to help people address their own mental health issues. They then lead to self-medicating. And so I want you to know that's a priority for us as well. We're hoping to be able to present some legislation, probably not this summer because this is all appropriations period now, but it is something that the Mental Health Caucus and other groups, the communities and members of Congress have been hard hit by it. It is a priority. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it.
After Ms. Escobar, the last three questions would be Mr. Hart, Connie Crawford, and John Russell. Irma Hickman.
Good afternoon.
Ms. Black, thank you for all the work you've done and for representing El Paso in such a positive way. Today is regarding gun laws. Because, gun violence touches all of us, either directly or indirectly. Are you working on any bipartisan proposals that will address this issue in the so?
Yes, ma'am. In fact, I am so fortunate to be able to work with some incredible members of Congress who ran specifically because of the impact that gun violence had on them and their lives, and I've learned so much. I'll give you one example. Lucy McBath. Lucy McBath is the representative from Georgia whose son was killed because of senseless gun violence. And she took her pain and her suffering, and she turned it into an effort to change things. So I've learned a lot from Lucy, and I have the privilege of serving with her on the House Judiciary Committee, where we passed bipartisan gun legislation for universal background checks and gun laws to close the loopholes of not having background checks substantive enough at gun shows. So we passed that out of committee. We passed it on the House floor. It was bipartisan. It too is sitting in front of Senator Mitch McConnell's door. And he has said very clearly that they will not be debating the issue on the Senate floor. I think it's good to have these debates. It is so important to have these discussions. Without these discussions, we're never going to address anything. So I am hopeful that at some point, Senator McConnell will open the door to a Senate debate on these two pieces of legislation. There are other pieces of legislation that we're working on as well. And let me tell you, the universal background check, it has support across the country regardless of party. It is one of those issues the few issues that polls well among Democrats, Republicans, and independents. Not everyone likes it, but the vast majority of people believe there should be a minimum of background checks. Thank you. Mr. Hart.
Escobar, before we get to the matter at hand, I want to say a word about the Riverside Color Guard. I saw them twice. They showed the training, they showed discipline. And the people who trained them are credit to all of Riverside High School. And it seemed to me, young people like them are the future for all of us in this great nation. Now, I want to talk about money. Currency. And I ask all of you to help. A show of hands. How many know what a mill is? Currency. What's a mill? Anybody know? No. It's 1/10 of a cent. Has anybody ever seen a mill? Not like this. You don't know what it is. Nobody's ever seen a mill. I've never seen a mill. Somebody handed to me, what's that? Now the point, this is almost like an early Christmas present for you. It's win-win. You should put forth a bill to raise the cost of fuel by 1/10 of 1 cent. If you go to buy 1 gallon of gas and the price is $2.89.9, you will not pay $2.89, you will pay $2.90. It's a lot of nonsense. It doesn't do any good. You get rid of it, it's simple, and it's win-win. And you should be able to get co-sponsors on both sides of the aisle. Everybody loves an easy victory. My only other word of advice, don't let the lawyers get anywhere near it. One well-written paragraph should do it. The lawyers get near it, it's going to be 5 pages that nobody will understand, including lawyers. And I want to thank you for your patience. And we all know you're a patient woman. Some of the stuff you put up with. And that about covers it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. I appreciate you so much. And let me tell you, the gas tax is an issue we've been talking about. And raising the gas tax, which has not been raised in over a decade, in order to fund an infrastructure package. We have crumbling roads and bridges in our country. And we are seeing a need in community after community after community for infrastructure. And it doesn't just mean actual concrete infrastructure. It also means broadband for rural communities. It means renewable jobs. We have to do a better job in our country of getting ahead of problems, and we have not done that. And the chickens have come home to roost. You know, I'll tell you, when I was a county judge, I served on the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO. We were warned, and it's been 2 years since I've served on the MPO. We were warned 2 years ago that I-10 was in desperate need of reconstruction. And we were warned by the TxDOT engineer almost every meeting, if you all don't do something and raise the revenue, because the feds aren't doing it, the state's not doing it, we are going to have crumbling infrastructure right here in our backyard. And so this is a priority for all of us. We believe, many of us in the House believe the gas tax is precisely where we should look for increasing revenue. It's a user fee, essentially. As you use our roads and highways, we've got to start paying for improvements. So thank you for the suggestion, Mr. Hart. I appreciate it. And thank you for your kindness. A mill. I'm going to go say a mill. Good afternoon.
Related to infrastructure, I have a little more mundane question. As I'm sure you know, El Paso only has train service 2 days a week. Amtrak service. Until the 90s, there was daily service. Would you support, number one, a resolution to ask Amtrak to serve El Paso daily, and two, to ask Congress to help pay for that? Because there would be costs associated with that the local community would be asked to bear. That would be at a federal level. Just wondering about your position on that piece of the infrastructure.
I have very fond memories of Amtrak. When I went off to graduate school back in the, early 90s, I went to NYU graduate school, and my dad dropped me off, and we went via Amtrak. And it was the most difficult experience and the most wonderful experience. We had hours and hours and hours of gossiping and chatting. It is one of the most beautiful memories I have of my dad, was riding that train across country. And I will never forget, as after a few days, after he helped move me in, and when he turned around and go down the escalator back to his train, and when he turned around and there were tears in his eyes, I will never forget that. I have very fond memories of Amtrak. I was not aware that they had service. Trains are so important because they cut down on the pollution of cars and airplanes. I would absolutely look into that and explore that. We'll circle back with you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm a train passenger persons. But anyway, there was a person that asked me to ask you, how do you get hold of that Mueller report? So,
it's online. The Mueller report, yeah.
Okay. The other thing is, I keep hearing this business about poor people against less poor people, and this is what's happening. And first, the other thing I want to say, you're still doing the people's business. I remember that was one of your catchwords. And I think you're resurrecting the notion that government has a very positive role to play in our economy. Ever since Ronald Reagan, government was the problem. Well, no. He took the strong leg of government out from underneath our economy, and it was the backup for the ordinary people in this country. The government was. When private industry and private concerns would not do their job, the government would step in and help out. And they had higher taxes on the wealthy, higher corporate taxes, and our economy boomed. And I think that's one of the problems too. You get the far right who wants to starve the baby, and they blame taxes. Well, no. If you're going to cut taxes on the most wealthy and the most powerful, corporate taxes and all this kind of stuff, what does that leave for the rest of us? We're starving. And let's quit this business about working people fighting against each other, the poor against the less poor. Because when that happens, then you have what's going on right now. And government does have a positive role to play in our lives, and you are still doing the people's business.
Thank you so much. I do subscribe to that philosophy. I don't believe government should ever fix everything, do everything, but government does have a positive role. I saw it in the work we did together at the county, and I see it in the work we can do together at the federal government.
Hello, good afternoon, welcome. Good afternoon, Congressman. First of all, I want to thank you for the town halls and for giving us the opportunity. You're always so responsive to your constituents. I really appreciate it. I know that redistricting is really more a state question, but I was wondering if you had any comments or ideas on how the Congress could help that issue, since I think it really impacts everything that happens in the country.
Thank you for that question. I agree, and I think redistricting is the reason why it's not the reason, but I think it's one of the reasons why there are such deep divisions in our country right now. When you have politicians who are able to draw their own lines and draw out of their district people who disagree with them, and draw into their district only people who agree with them, you get a very hardened view of a certain perspective. Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. And so I see redistricting as one of those ills of our democracy. We actually passed legislation, the very first piece of legislation. I'd like to answer your question. Yeah, if you have a question, I'll see and answer your question. And so HR 1 is the very first omnibus piece of legislation that the Congress passed. Within HR 1 are transparency reforms for campaign finance to try to expose dark money in politics, restoring the Voting Rights Act, which has been eroded, and then lastly, redistricting. And within that legislation is an independent commission that draws the district lines. It should never be in the hands of a politician to draw the lines for his or her own district. We're asking for trouble, and we have gotten trouble with that. So HR 1 is another one of those that's at the front door of Majority Leader Mitch McConnell in the Senate. We had a press conference last week calling on him to at least take that one up, because it also calls for elections integrity protection. And if there's anything we learned from the Mueller report, even if folks want to ignore everything else, it's that our elections were tampered with. And so we need to protect the integrity of our election. That's in HR 1, which we passed in January. Thank you. We're going to take one last question. Want to remind, you were on the list? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to stay until. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here.
What I want to talk about is trains. The reason I want to talk about trains is that I don't know if you knew that on May 24th, the federal government before the mandate that they want to stop all the legislation that the states are trying to put forward for safety on the railroad. Donald Trump and DOT Secretary Elaine Chao and Federal Administrator Ron Tory taking sides, and the CEOs of both governments. We've been trying to get 10 years ago those rules in place by Congress to make communities safe and making sure that chemicals and all the stuff that they're doing. I'm a community. I worked 25 years on the railroad and retired. But I got to see firsthand. I was a legislative rep for 14 years, which is the guy that watches for safety on the railroad. We have a yard right here, just a half a mile away from the slabs. The yard. With the river. You have propane in there. Fluoride, fuel, all kinds of makers and stuff that one car can kill this whole community down. One rat is one rough. And they decided that now they want to run trains, they want to run autonomous trains. They're trying to do this. I know for a fact, that every time they try to do a train on that software, when I was in a train, they had to report halfway and say, okay, take it over, it's not doing what it's supposed to do. What that means is that anywhere in the United States where there is a community that has a railroad is in peril right now, is in trouble. Because profit has gone beyond the point of safety. And safety has to be number one priority for you run. One train that comes to a platform can have 10,000 tons of dangerous chemical waste. That's 10,000. I don't know if people understand that. Because, like I said, there's one one part of the part that we have no facilities for flushing out a car here. They don't have a glass wall in case one ruptures and it blows up. The neighborhood may still get that's the fact of what's going on. And it's not under the radar because nobody knows about the railroad because it's been a secret type of business. But I'm just telling you, that's going on right now, and I don't know if you're aware of it or anybody else at work, but they just kind of slipped it in because there's so many others.
Thank you so much for raising that issue. I'm going to make sure that we look into that. And do you know, is there legislation to prevent the autonomous driving rail cars?
They try to put it into place for in the hope of getting rid of employees. That's a means to
right, to cut costs.
Yes, to cut costs to make more profit. But we don't have flat territory in our area. We have off banks and stuff that needs a person in charge of what's going on. A machine doesn't know that somebody's stopped there. With a bus full of children, a machine doesn't know that it's stopped there.
We will definitely look into that. And if I could get your number, we'll circle back with you on our results, okay? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Eric Willard. Hi, Representative. I want to start first by saying I'm so proud of you. You're good. And I have really complaints. So, to be honest with you now. But I am concerned about impeachment. And I'm concerned about our country and what we, and I hope I'm being loud enough so everybody can hear me because I had a hard time hearing. And I didn't begin to write things down. But I think our country is still under attack. I think it has been absolutely destroyed by what happened. Our country is totally different because of this administration, and it needs to be changed. He needs to be impeached. I don't care if we can't get him convicted and removed from the Senate. That's not the point of the House. The House's point or purpose is to impeach when they see something wrong. This man has done more stuff that is absolutely wrong to this country, to this nation, to its people, to everyone in the world, and he needs to be impeached. It's got to be done. And the way that we started, when we want to become, you were running for office, we weren't prepared to go that direction, and I wanted to ask you today what caused you to change, but you've already answered the question. Although I will tell you guys all need to be referring to the Mueller report as the redacted Mueller report, because 448 pages, you can't even read all of it because it's been so blacked out. But the bottom line is, you made a point a little while, and I don't know if people heard this, and I don't see it being spoken about enough, and that is that with regard to the alleged collusion, the evidence was destroyed. That's what Mueller's report says. The evidence had been destroyed. It was hidden, it was destroyed, and that's why he could not move forward. It wasn't because it wasn't that they had done something wrong. It was because these folks actually destroyed it. That is a crime. And yet, Mueller didn't investigate. They didn't go and prosecute that. Likewise, with regard to Donald Trump Jr., he's not a president, therefore he doesn't have the DOJ rule applying to him. So why didn't he prosecute Trump Jr. for what he did on June 9th of 2016? There's so much there. And the problem is, the good Republicans, the ones who are not Trumpites, but are actually Republicans and conservatives, things like George F. Will, all know that this man is bad for the country. And it's important for you to get these people, Nancy Pelosi in particular, talking about it, and go forward with the impeachment because it's needed for them to hear how deep it is, how bad it is. We can't work together. Obstructing justice, like she said, you're trying to investigate. I applaud your efforts. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Willard. I appreciate this too. And Mr. Willard made a point about what's in the redacted Mueller report. There are actually other issues of significant concern to us that have never made it into the media. One of the things that has made it into the media is that many in the administration use those encrypted apps like WhatsApp and Signal to communicate. There's no public record. When I worked as your county judge, we had to preserve all records. That is true for the President of the United States as well. There are a number of those records that have disappeared, so there's still so much we don't even know about. Thank you, Mr. Willard. But I'm with you.
Gracie Lawrence, Carlos Fuentes, Jeanette Walker.
And one more since Mr. Fuentes already went. Welcome. Thank you for being here. So good to see you.
Good to see you. My question is about presidential executive orders. I know presidents can do this, but I think what's unknown, and I did a lot of research, is that once these are signed, the moment a president declares a national emergency, it's in his discretion with 100 special provisions become available to him. And there was a law, they tried to cut that back in 1976. It's the National Emergencies Act, which said that a president, if they declare an emergency, he has to report to Congress about related expenditures every 6 months. And after a year, unless the president renews it, the Senate and the House must meet every 6 months while the emergency is in effect to consider a vote on termination. But this law really failed because in 40 years, the law has been in place. Congress has not met even once, let alone every 6 months to vote on whether to end them. So I just wondered if
I need a copy of that.
Okay, I'll give it to you. I was shocked. But I mean, because, and it's not just President Trump, I mean, it's every president. There has to be a check and balance. That's why we have
the People's House.
Yeah, yep. Exactly. So I just wondered, I'll give this to you.
And we will look into it. We'll circle back. Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hi, welcome. So good to see you.
Walker. Veronica, you already addressed the issues that surrounded the 2016 election, the cyber attacks and misinformation, all that. I'm concerned about the upcoming election and also the census. If we're going to be able to protect the integrity of those two events, because that's fundamental to our democracy.
We stand to undercount on the census because of the citizenship question millions and millions of people. We heard 6 million. I think that's a very conservative estimate. And what happens when we undercount, I don't know that folks understand it hurts communities because it means less revenue. It means fewer resources. The more people we have, the more money we access for transportation, for healthcare, for infrastructure, you name it. So even if you're okay with the census question, you have to be prepared with the drop in resources that communities like ours will get as a consequence. So, you know, and the recent information that came to light on the census question, that it was specifically put in there as a plan to limit minority voices. We knew all along that was the intended purpose. We're hoping for a good outcome at the Supreme Court, but we're not hopeful. I'm not hopeful. That means communities like ours will have to really redouble our efforts to knock on every door, to reach every person, to assure people why this information is necessary, that it doesn't pose a risk to them, and it will help the community that they live in. So that's the census is number one. What was the other question? The election?
The election in 2020. How are we going to defend the integrity of that election against cyber attacks and misinformation by both domestic and foreign folks?
So the one thing that does give me some comfort is that we have agencies that since the attack have come together to make attempts to protect the integrity of our election. But our HR 1 bill goes even further. If you all have voted recently, you've seen that El Paso County has new voting machines, so that you actually get a paper receipt, and then the receipt gets scanned in, so you see who you voted for. You get that paper trail that so many Americans want. I am so proud of El Paso County for taking the initiative, but El Paso County had to pay for those machines out of their own budget. So I'm hoping that when we pass legislation, we can reimburse communities like El Paso for those machines, because they're protecting the integrity of elections. But not every county does this. Not every county can afford it. Not every county wants to do it, nor should it be up to them. It has to be up to the federal government, and that's why HR 1 is so important. Thank you.
Karen Powers, Albert Antrombo, Rick Johnson.
Maybe oh, here she comes. Totally up to you. And for those of you, we'll take the pause right here. We have gone way over time. I'm happy to stay as long as you want me to answer every last question, but I know we had only programmed an hour, so if you have to leave, it's not going to hurt my feelings. I understand you stay longer. And so for those of you who will be leaving, I want to thank you so much for spending your Saturday with me. It's been such a privilege to be with all of you. And stick around as long as you like. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Actually, I just want to applaud you, first of all, for the passage of HR 987. And I just wondered about how there might be a connection under HR 1046 and what is the status of that particular bill that I have particularly listened.
Okay, you'll have to remind me what those bills do.
Okay, all right. HR 1046 is a Medicare negotiation and competition licensing bill, Act of 2019, which addresses mainly negotiation with drugs for Medicare, as opposed to HR 987, which is the marketing and outreach. I can't read my red.
So we are still working through those issues in the caucus. We had a great meeting last week with experts in the pharmaceutical industry who were trying to teach us the tricks to getting to lower prescription drugs. One of them, obviously, and I support this, is allowing the federal government to negotiate. Because it is the power of the federal government and the negotiating that I believe will help lower the cost of those drugs. One of the things that we're working on in my office is transparency for what are called RBMs, the middleman. There is, I don't want to use a word that's too strong. It is a very problematic system that hides from the American public the way that companies control the cost of drugs. And so in the absence of moving, some of those might be tougher. I think transparency is something everybody can get around. And the more that the American public learns, the more of a drumbeat I hope there will be on both sides of the aisle to give the federal government the power to negotiate. Thank you.
Mr. Albert Anchondo, Rick Johnson, Eric Willard, James Beynado.
Good afternoon, welcome.
Escobar, how are you?
Doing well.
Great, thanks for joining us, and I just want you to know that the letter carriers of El Paso really appreciate all the support that you have shown us in your term as our congressman. I want to tell you very quickly about House Resolution 2382. It expresses the sense of the House of Representatives to repeal the USPS pre-funding mandate. Since 2006, through congressional law, the USPS has been mandated to pre-fund health benefits for future retirees at a rate of over $5 billion annually. No other U.S. corporation or government agency has been overburdened with this politically manufactured requirement and crisis. Were the burden not imposed, the Postal Service would have recorded surpluses of nearly $4 billion since 2013. The pre-funding mandate accounts for 92% of Postal Service losses in the last 12 years. The current manufactured financial crisis on the Postal Service need not continue. The pre-funding mandate must be removed and replaced with a business sense rate setting system, which is now being developed by USPS regulators. I want to ask you if you will co-sponsor House Resolution 2382. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Anchondo. It sounds like something I could support, but let me read it first, and we'll circle back with you. But I've been very supportive of your efforts, the efforts by the postal workers to have some protections, and we depend on you. We benefit from the work that you do. We've got to take care of you. So thank you very much.
By the way, we collected 80,000 pounds in our last run. Thank you,
Okay, how many more, MJ? 4 more questions. Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Rick Johnson. I came to El Paso in 1990. I worked as a customs special agent, doing investigations, working the border down here. I'm familiar with it. We've had a very orderly process here today. Order was the man here read the rules of the road, and people are made to abide to them. Long-haired gentleman made some short, just one word comment, and we got taken out of here. So we've also got an orderly process at our border with our immigration law, which was turned on its head by a federal district court judge in December of 2018, when he ruled that asylum claims made between the ports of entry had to be allowed, so that anybody stepping a foot on the U.S. side of the river, even though they're expensive, would be able to make those claims. The other thing that makes that possible is the border is not secured with walls, so people were showing up at Antelope Wells and all of that. So this has been turned on its head by that district court judge. The Supreme Court let it ride. They decided they wouldn't do anything about it. And but Congress can do something about this. We got chaos at the border with these people overrunning these border patrol agents, showing up at group meetings 1,000 at a time. It's chaos. There are rules of the road. There's nothing wrong with the immigration law other than it's been not enforced. It's been had rulings come against it by judges saying you got to do it this way and that way. We've got to bring some order to this, and Congress can do that and fix what this immigration judge has turned on its head. There's one other thing I want to mention that I didn't see on the pie chart, and that's federal spending. $22 trillion fiscal operating debt.
and more than that for the unfunded liabilities for Social Security and Medicare. It's beyond comprehensive. There seems to be no end of the things that the federal government's representatives want to claim that they can do for their people in exchange for votes on it. So this has got to be brought under control because we're spending money of the yet to be born and the yet to be, conceived, the children who are going to come do something. It's got to be taken care of. So.
Thank you so much. Oh, I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah, no, thank you. And just a little footnote about that gentleman. He joined us in the morning, and we had cautioned him about cursing and outbursts. So he knew one more time, we want to keep order because you see how great it is, as you mentioned, to have order. We always want to make sure that our constituents feel like they can hear and they can be heard and that people are treated with respect. Okay, so the deficit and spending, I am so with you. Every time the president, for example, announces another bailout for farmers, I have to wonder, where is this coming from? Where are these tens of billions of dollars coming from? No, we pay tariffs. The consumer pays the tariffs. So we're being taxed on, so there's no pot of money for tariffs. It's money coming out of our pocket to pay for goods at a higher price. So the bailouts of farmers, for example, and I will tell you, we have to protect agriculture. If we don't protect our farmers, I am very worried about our future and our ability to feed this nation. However, the tariffs are putting those farmers out of business at alarming rates. Bankruptcies, I met with a group of farmers, 10 farmers about a month ago from all over the Midwest who were at their wits' end, who were saying they were shutting down their farms, they were shutting down their businesses. Maine lobster fishermen, so the lobster they're sending to China, it's done. They are in desperate straits. And it seems to get votes whenever this administration can pay off folks, the money always materializes. I think also when it comes to the tax bill, that tax bill needs to be repealed. The tax bill that was passed essentially rewards the wealthiest 1% and corporations while it leaves the rest of us in the dust. And so I would like to see a repeal of that tax bill. I would like to see us protecting the middle class and protecting working Americans, not those who don't need the protections of the federal government. Now, with regard to the law that you mentioned, I do want to put something in perspective for you. So a lot of these folks were coming and presenting themselves at the ports of entry. And they were seeking asylum. They essentially were told, we're closed. You cannot come in. And so we had our own government driving people away, literally, from the ports of entry to Antelope Wells. Then, as they get detained and apprehended there, we have to send transportation and agents to go pick them up and bring them back to the urban center. Everything, in my view, that this administration has done has made things worse. I want to address the issue. I don't know that I agree with you on the change in the law. I'm happy to look at it. You raised it. I'm happy to evaluate it. I don't know that I agree, but I will look at it. Okay? Thank you. Thank you for being here. Our last. Right. All spending starts in the Congress, and we've seen this administration circumvent Congress with his emergency declaration by stealing money from the DOD for a wall. We have a lawless president who is ignoring the Congress. I am with you. We have the power of the purse. We have seen this president circumvent that power of the purse. But we're going to get, sir, we're going to remain orderly, and we're going to get to the next question.
Our last three on the sign-up sheet is Mr. James Spainado, Mr. Crowder, Melissa Cole, and William Denan.
Maybe we lost a couple along the way. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome.
Hi. My name is James Spainado with the Center for the West Side. Thank you for having this town hall and for extending time for people to speak. I just wanted to kind of echo some of those other comments about, I am somebody who calls on the Republican side for all the times that they break with the Constitution and fail to uphold their oath. It's in their rhetoric a little bit more often about constitutional limited government values. So, I mean, I agree that he doesn't have the authority to bypass Congress to raise tariffs or to redirect spending that wasn't appropriated by Congress first. But I think, you should encourage Republicans on that side to do more of that, but also it would be a lot more helpful if people on the Democrat side of the aisle did more to focus on their own reaches with the Constitution. I think Democrats were largely silent on all the times that President Obama bypassed Congress. And so that's in the past, but today we can do things to push for it. But I mean, like, why should Republicans take Democrats seriously? Really? I mean, I have really good friends, Nicholas Viñales, a really great friend, and we talk about this. And when he expresses how upset he is about President Trump bypassing Congress and not following the Constitution, I had to roll my eyes and say, I don't really care about your opinion because you were silent 4 years ago. And I tried to make this an issue with you then, and you made excuses for it. And so really, it's more than anything, it's in the Republicans' call to show integrity. And the best that Democrats can do, I believe, is just to try to find ways to work with Republicans. And I'm glad that you guys won the House. I'm not glad about it, but I think we have to respect that election. Just as, I want President Trump to work with Democrats on immigration reform and other things, but you guys continue on with this Mueller investigation. It's a waste of time. There was no Russian collusion. There was possible some obstruction, but in my mind, if a police officer planted evidence in my backyard so that he could start an investigation, why should I sympathize with the police officers? I feel that Bill Barr needs to go after the NSA, the Department of Justice, the CIA, and put some of those people in prison for Nixonian-style practices, politicizing those institutions. Finally, real quick, the NDAA, because you spent so much time on it, there's a lot of root causes to push factors. We need to hold the State Department, Obama's State Department, accountable for destabilizing Honduras and for all the times that we've intervened in Central America. So I'm really worried about advocating for further spending on troops in Central America. We need to just get out of there and stop destabilizing those countries and use capitalism to fix it.
And I don't agree with troops being sent to Central America. That's not what I'm advocating for. I'm advocating for some of the programs that have worked, that have helped address poverty and violence. And our intervention in Central America began long before President Obama. This goes back all the way to the Reagan administration, and administration after administration after administration. I think there's plenty of blame to go around. And I agree with you. We need to hold everybody accountable at the same level. I can only hold myself accountable. You can only hold me accountable. As I said to some of my Republican freshmen, because I've especially reached out to Republican freshmen, we're new. We don't bring the same baggage. We haven't cast some of these votes. We have an opportunity to work together in a bipartisan manner that sets a new standard. I'm going to keep trying to do that because we have to. The division that our country is living through is painful. And I think we all recognize that. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Is this our last question? Two more?
Our last name, Coles. Some people, C-O-L-E-S, is wrong. Some people pronounce it Coles. Today I introduced myself as Doug Coles, but my actual name is Warren Cowles. So if you want to run down anyone, you can run down with people today.
Welcome, sir.
Not necessarily in that order, just pick out your own order. If I can think of another one, you can get up to 4. I'm sorry I missed the last meeting. However, I did want to ask you, what did you, the one meeting I was at, I made a suggestion, and what did you find out about my suggestion?
Can you remind me about your suggestion?
Remind you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. As you know, it's extremely hard to immigrate to the United States. Outside of, I guess, Israel, we're the hardest country in the world to immigrate to. So I mentioned to you my suggestion for the people from Ecuador, Mexico, Guatemala, Venezuela, Haiti, and that bastion of freedom, Cuba, with Fidel Castro. However, nowadays, I believe he's down there. I don't think he's up there. He wasn't a very nice guy. His younger brother, Raul Castro, is in charge of Cuba now. I'll just use the number 100. If they vote, at the end of the vote, it's 100-0. That's a pretty good, and it seems to be 100 all the time. And that what you would consider a dictatorship. By the way, if anyone would like to move to Cuba, and especially to Venezuela, I'm sure they'll take you immediately and bring up all the money you can because they're having problems.
And sir, what was your question, your suggestion?
I asked you, did you, when I made the suggestion, did you talk to your other Congress people and senators and give my suggestion to immigrate to another country?
Yeah, no, I have not asked my colleagues about immigrating to another country. I just no, sir. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Melissa Cole. Miss Cole.
Yes, sir. And I answered your question, sir. Right. Sir, you asked me if I had asked my colleagues if they would emigrate to another country, and I did not. You don't have to ask me, but sir, we're going to go ahead. Sir, we're going to go ahead and ask. Sir, I'm happy to stay. If you'll stay, I'll talk with you after. I want to get rid of these last two. Well, no, we're going to move on to the next question. I did not.
I should have did right there.
Thank you. I'm happy to stick around and talk to you. Thank you for being here, sir. I'll stick around and chat with you. We're going to get to the next question. Okay, our next question. Hi, good afternoon, welcome. And MJ, who's after this? This is it? Oh, together, okay.
It's on purpose there. Because the baby there is seen. It's serious.
Mine is a question for the disabled. I'm disabled and I get Social Security. And I'm getting abused from the child support system. They've been taking payments after payments, and they missed 2 payments because they missed me on September. And I don't get visitation rights either. I keep paying, but no visitations. They're interested of the child. That's wrong. That business is wrong. So my question is, why are disability getting abused?
Thank you for asking. We're going to get your phone number so that we can open up a case and look into your circumstances, okay? They took 2 payments, okay?
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Okay, so what we're basically going through is we want to see our kids. They're taking our money for the reputation. I mean, it's like the only reason why that they don't enforce, then they enforce payments by all means, but they don't enforce visitation. Now the thing is, there's two parts of the Texas Penal Code 2503, where I mean, it's something about not agreeing with the government separating families, but this is what's going on here in our country. So the thing is, it's like I found out that the custodial parent can take back, you know, like I guess the sign up that you take a person off the child support. Okay, I get that. So is the reason why they don't prosecute for not denying visitation is because the custodial parent will go back to the agency after being incarcerated and terminate the contract, causing them to lose money. Is this the reason why we're not enforcing it? I spoke to the DA and I asked him, and he's the highest part, and he said, well, it depends on how severe the case is. Well, under contract law, we both have to do our part, right? Otherwise, we can become accountable. Now, here's an interesting thing. When I signed that contract, it was the agreement that I was going to have visitation with my daughter, and it was not, you know, even, I could not have unsupervised visitation until she turned 3 and was able to see me. Okay, I get that, no problem, signed it. But then about a month and a half later, I get this court order, a copy of it, and they place the name, you know, my name as a danger to the mother who can cause harassment or serious bodily harm. I have no criminal history. It took 3 years for CPS to do a background check, as well as 100 hair follicle drug tests, and I have to find out it's still no visitation. So what can we do to hold these people accountable? I mean, can we file maybe under the RICO Act? I mean, because that's basically extortion. They're taking money, but they're not enforcing both parts. And there's two parts of it.
So unfortunately, I don't know the answer to your question, but we do want to help you get the answer to your question. And if there's a federal angle to this, you know, we want to help you work through it. But we will get your information so that we can open up a case for you. Okay?
Don't come out, and they won't do anything.
So we will look into this with you. So please make sure we have your number. Okay, thank you. And I think that's it. I think that completes our town hall for today. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you most especially for the privilege of being your Congresswoman. Have a great Saturday.
All right, everybody, that's the conclusion of the Escobar event. Head outside here, go get stuff.
Take care, young man. See you in the next one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll see you then.
We'll see you.
All right.
Okay.
You guys take care. Good to meet you guys.
Good meeting you.
You too. Take care.
Good speech. Tell you what.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, guys. All right. We are done with the Veronica Escobar Town Hall meeting. And some good questions on all sides. Again, I'm not a fan of the cheerleading for the impeachment of the president because I don't think it's valid or necessary. And again, my comment I made was there's only 40-something people in Congress who are supporting a impeachment process. There's 535 congressional members. So it's a very tiny minority who are asking for impeachment. I think it's a waste of our taxpayer money. I think it's a waste of time for the American people. All it is it's a political game that they're playing for the news. I think what needs to happen is we need to get back to the business of the people. We need to stop hounding about how president may or may have not been involved with Russia. The Mueller report says that there was no evidence that he did collude with the Russians, but they're trying to go after him for an obstruction of an investigation into that. But it's like James mentioned, the gentleman with the big hat. He said it himself, and he was very good toward the end there. He said, if the police planted something in my house that I never did, for a crime that I didn't commit, I'm sure as heck not going to work with the police after I've tried to work with him to prove my innocence. They're going to continue to go after me for something I didn't do. They're only going to get the basics out of me. Now, President Trump gave over 1 million documents, from what I understand, to Congress for their investigation. I think if they can't find anything with that, then there was probably nothing there to begin with. We know that the dossier was phony. We know that they made it up. Christopher Steele, the British spy, admitted to that. And in fact, I think he's going to be coming up he's going to be questioned by the FBI now or some other organization into his act and why, it wasn't a verified dossier. If you don't have a verified dossier about whatever it is he has been doing, well, then how can you consider that evidence if it's not even, it's like somebody just made something up and said, hey, I saw you murder that person over there, and the cops arrest you and put you in prison because somebody said something. It's not fair. This is America. If the president did something wrong, and if the president did something wrong blatantly to put the country in danger, then he should be impeached. I have no problem with that. I do not believe President Trump did that. So I support the president at this point. As long as he continues to fight for America, fight what is right, he's got my support. Ms. Escobar has her thoughts, and that's the Democratic perspective, and that's fine. But as I said, my point is, just because the Trump supporters and the Republicans want secure borders doesn't make them Nazis. And to call Trump supporters cruel and the Border Patrol agents cruel, it's unfair. They had no idea this huge influx of immigrants was going to come. We can't just let them out because there's so many. But thanks to the president, apparently now Mexico is going to hold them in Mexico until they're processed, until their asylum claim is processed, which I think is very good news. Now, I don't know how that's going to work. I'm here in El Paso, and I'm here on the border, and I know they just come walk right in. Are they going to close the gate for a change and say, go back to Mexico and sit there? Or are they going to let them in, and we're going to have to spend taxpayer money to send them back to Mexico while they wait? This is a problem. I think we need to hear more details about the agreement with Mexico, and hopefully we can hear something soon. I know that the policy is probably going to come out. We'll hear all about everything. If it hasn't come out today yet, I haven't had a chance to look for it. But nonetheless, this was Veronica's June Town Hall meeting, Texas District 16, and it was a long one. I give her credit for sticking around to answer all the questions. Last month it was cut short, but this month she stuck around, which was fantastic. I like what she's doing for veterans. I like that in El Paso. We really emphasized that we need to support the veterans, and there's a lot of shortfalls. Some of the bills that she's sponsoring is good progress. My problem now is that Congress, people are not even working with each other. I don't know if we'll even see some of these bills passed for people like myself and other military veterans who are needing some more assistance in certain areas. But nonetheless, it's a good start, and hopefully some of this stuff will actually make some progress. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. I just care that you're working for the benefit of Americans and the system we have today, the situations in the country. So, all right, until next time, this has been with Sunset Industries, and again this evening, about 6 o'clock, I'll be downtown. We're going to be at a festival in the Rio area downtown. If you don't know, if you're from out of town and you don't know about the Rio area, take a look. It's a historical place here. In fact, it's so historical that the Apache Indians that used to live here actually had some location there that some archaeological findings can be done. So we're going to go visit that today, later on this afternoon. And it's been a long day. It's a long day so far, but it's a great day. It's a beautiful day here in El Paso. If you live in El Paso, you need to get outside. It's a nice little breeze. Again, here at Riverside High School. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off. And I appreciate you guys watching. Please share and get the word out. We need to get this channel to grow so we can get more information out to more people. All right, guys. Take care. Talk to you soon.